Thanks for joining us. Yeah, my name is Matt Yeti. I'm Director of Technology here at Ivoxy Consulting. I see a lot of familiar names on that attendees list, so thanks for joining. Good to see you. And if you don't know me, I've been at Ivoxy. We'll be 12 years here now in May. Um, I started as a consultant, became a senior solutions architect over the years with an awful lot of design scoping, and about 18 months ago was promoted to director of technology here to lead our consultant team. But that also, I also did not shed my solutions architect role. So I'm still taking meetings, doing designs, the stuff that makes my job really fun. Still love doing that. And one of those things is hearing challenges from our customers and coming up with solutions. And that's why I'm here today. And there are a couple of partners of ours that offer solutions to a product or a area of technology that's near and dear to my heart. Uh, Not to be reductive, the one thing we're really going to be focusing on here today is email traffic, and email integrity. It's something that I've done in my career for since, I mean, I hate to date myself, right? Over 20 years for sure. I've been working on email one form or another. And I feel like no matter what, no matter how many headaches or tools you've worked around to different file systems, document management, etc., email is there. It's still there. It's not going anywhere. And we're all trying to make sure it's, the most secure and easy way to get things done, truly. So we've got two amazing partners of ours that are approaching the basically ensuring the integrity of email in different ways. You've got Rubrik that has been a long time partner of Ivoxy. Um, and you hear Rubrik and you probably start to think back up, and yeah, they're the best in the game at that and then some. And one of the things that they've added a number of years ago, in my opinion, best in class, best of breed M365 email protection. And there's a lot more than that. That's super reductive. I'm going to let Ryan go in on that. And then we have a newer partner of ours that I'm just excited about, Abnormal Security, in that, uh, not to knock anybody, right? But our users, if we could prevent them from clicking on things and doing things, like my network would be perfect if it wasn't for those darn users, is kind of the concept, right? So if you can protect your users from themselves when it comes to what they get in email, unsolicited or otherwise, you would be in a much better position if you could guarantee that. Abnormal works in that direction to ensure that you can take that headache off your plate for the most part. So I guess that's as good a time as any. David Nicholson is with us from Abnormal. I think, David, I can kick it over to you. You want to introduce yourself, and we can talk a little bit about what makes Abnormal different and what your approach is to email security.
Yeah, I wanted to say thanks to your team for inviting us today and really looking forward to talking about a few key points about Abnormal. I've been here for just about 3 years now, and that means that I've been with Abnormal for half of its lifespan. Somewhat of a young company, but one of the key factors there is how we're leveraging the knowledge of our founders to really start protecting businesses. But just wanted to tell you thank you for including us today.
It's my pleasure, David. It's really good to have you on here. So half of Abnormal's lifetime. How long has that been?
So Normal is about 6 years old now. One of the things that's amazing is our position in the industry, and that is we are the second fastest growing startup ever, following Wiz, meaning that we made it to 100 million in revenue in a very short period of time. The only other company that has done better at that has been Wiz.
Not bad at all. So Abnormal, David, I know that, well, anybody who knows me who has talked, said, Matt, what's your opinion on AI? Knows that you're probably going to by default get an eye roll out of me because, like anything, there's so much hype and so much buzz
Right.
and so little rubber meets the road, right? Um, but and I say this and I say it seriously. Abnormal feels like, okay, you're actually leveraging AI to improve, not just like let how do you sell this pen, right? That's the what is it from the Wolf of Wall Street, that ending scene. Sell me this pen, and the meme is you slap a sticker that says AI on it. That's the mood today. But I
Right.
feel Abnormal was born out of AI. It was created because what AI done properly actually enables. Not we had this product and now let's do this AI thing to catch all the the articles on that. I'm going to go into that a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So what we see in the industry is that term AI actually is a little bit of an umbrella. And when we get underneath the umbrella, what we find is machine learning, and specific to abnormal, what we're leveraging is behavioral machine learning. So building a understanding of the users within your 365 or GWS mail team. Well, that understanding really comes back to what we've heard Gartner refer to as a social graph. Do we really understand the behavior of the users? And when we start talking about behavioral machine learning, one of the most important things there is to have a large data set. That's how we can really look for those very subtle differences in communication pattern, whether it's time of day or the person in the conversation, or even the language that they're using. And the way that we get that is that we are integrated with your mail tenant through the API, and that gives us a much deeper visibility into that social graph.
So from what I've talked about, David, I'm wondering about that level of social graph and behavioral stuff because I mean, in terms of traditional email filtering, and I use that term. So people at Edinburgh might cringe at that, but I mean, in terms of what I understand to be email security, typically is that gateway, right? The mail comes through, and either it's good or it's bad, and we have various email technologies to determine that, whether that's SPF records, DMARC records to say what to do with it. You've got DKIM, there's BIMI, there's all of these reverse forward confirmed DNS.
Right.
But let's say it gets beyond that. Everything looks good. Yeah, it's coming from a good IP. What do we do? I like how Abnormal seems to be able to have more introspection in terms of, hey, even if it passes the muster on the gateway at the MX level, there is still something to be done should it end up being a malicious aspect, right, with M365?
Right, and that a little bit, when you use that term, something to be done, right? That's where we start spinning into, well, great, you're detecting things, but what are you doing about it? Because all of our security teams and IT teams right now are really strapped, right? We have been hearing for how many years that there's not enough people with skills, and seems like every year we're tightening budgets. So what can we do to not just identify, but also remediate? So Abnormal is taking an automated approach to remediation, not just within email, but across account takeover, notifying teams if we're seeing some sort of vendor compromise. And all of this really is being accomplished by leveraging multiple methods of both machine learning as well as leveraging autonomous AI to act out remediations or take steps in place of maybe a junior analyst, or even some of our senior team has to get involved in these types of activities just because our teams are so shorthanded.
So you're saying Abnormal has a proactive approach in terms of notifying with it. I knew I was going to do it. I'm going to use the word abnormal behavior, not referring to the company, but I see what you did there, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so Abnormal will notify. I'm somebody who's in charge of email admin at a company. So this is something where I don't have to just trust something's happening. If there is an issue, I will be notified. I'll get an alert. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, and there's a couple of different levels to that. If you wanted to, what I can do is jump into an example of, not just email detection, because Abnormal is expanding beyond email detection. One of the things that you mentioned earlier in the call is that idea that our users are kind of the weakest link. They are the easiest to social engineer. They're the easiest to convince them to click on something they shouldn't. And a lot of times that results in the loss of credentials, maybe installing malware, something like that. So now we need to expand beyond just protecting the user from malicious content. Why don't we also protect that user account from compromise and do that in an automated fashion? So let me share this really quick. One of the things that we do at Abnormal is we'll go through a process of a proof of value. We can integrate with your mail tenant in read-only mode. So we're able to start analyzing messages and showing you what we would remediate. But that also, for somebody like myself, presents a unique opportunity to see an attack move forward because we're not able to actively remediate it. If the organization themselves don't catch it during that POV, we can see where it's going to head. So talking about that account protection, what we'll see is a lot of tools are able to monitor for things like, are we seeing an unusual time of day for authentication? Are we seeing an unusual geolocation? So Abnormal's consuming those same type of authentication events, looking at, do we see a difference in their operating system, their browser, their authentication method, whether they're authenticating from Outlook or maybe hitting OWA directly. But then we're adding additional factors in there. Is it a normal time of day for this user? And as you can see in this particular account takeover, Dave's account was compromised. Abnormal picked up on that we're seeing an unusual IP address, that we're seeing those different activities in his authentication. But then what we see immediately after that is an unusual mail filter rule change, right? Attackers a lot of times will create an unusual rule to hide their own messaging activity from the real account owner. So Abnormal's also looking at those mail rules. We see that this rule is named with a single period, right? Most users aren't going to do that. So that seems like maybe it's abnormal. And then we look at the conditions of that rule. In this particular attack, the attacker was like, anything that is from armator.com, let's mark that as red and move it to a different folder. So now those messages are still flowing, but by moving to a different folder, the real account owner is not going to see that activity. And between those two things, an unusual authentication and then a suspicious mail filter rule, Abnormal triggered an account takeover case. Now, that was in POV, so we weren't able to actively remediate it. However, in a production environment or in a partnership where we're in active remediation, we can kick off automated remediation steps. And what we're going to do is kick out active sessions by invalidating their token. We're going to block the account and then trigger a password reset. Once the user's completed that password reset, we unlock the account. So now we don't have to put that workload on the detection team to find out, is this real account takeover? And they can have confidence with those remediation steps because they are a self-serve remediation.
David, I love that, and I think that's so unique because there are a lot of security products and solutions out in the field that do the detection for you, right? I don't have a team of security people. Yeah, of course. But if you're alerting me at 3 a.m. that something's wrong, that's lovely, but it's
Yeah.
still 3 a.m. I'm still in
Right.
bed. I still can't do anything about it. That automatic remediation is truly awesome to be able to do that.
Right. And if you don't have a follow the sun model or an MSP, Abnormal can sit in that position for you.
Oh, that's super cool. That's super cool. Well, another thing that about what you just showed that I think is super unique is email filter technologies. They've been around, forever. I remember 20 years ago rolling my own spam assassin, right? A store and forward email filter that leveraged Pizer and Razor, all of these, a real-time blacklist, spam house, all of that kind of stuff. But what you just showed had really nothing to do technically with the mail flow at that point.
Right.
Most of those filter solutions, if it passes its smell test, yup, it came from a good IP. You have sent an email to the sender before. SPF DNS lines up. That must be a good email. The fact that if it gets beyond the gateway by all intent, by all normal checks, that there's still something to look for. I mean, theoretically, that compromise could have happened and it wouldn't have even been related to an piece of email traffic, right? You're browsing, you click on something, it
Right.
hijacks your browser session, and away you go. Email's compromised. The fact that Abnormal can pick up on that's pretty unique.
Yeah. Even like you were mentioning, drive-by download site, now you're infected, and maybe all they steal is your tokens and walk away. That way they've kind of gone undetected and they can come back later with that token and do some sort of ATO.
So, can you talk a little bit about a business email compromise? Because again, with things like SPF and all that, a lot of
Right.
solutions will check that and say, "Yup, looks good. Susie's been emailing Dave and back and forth for
Yeah.
years, so clearly this is a learned good relationship." But Dave's email box just got hacked.
Right, right. And when we're looking at business email compromise, one of the terms that we use at Abnormal is vendor email compromise, because that's where really financial loss starts to enter the picture. Once we've compromised an account, that gives us a wealth of organizational understanding. Who owes whom money? Where could I act out some sort of financial fraud? So really understanding the participants in that conversation from both organizations. I mentioned earlier in the call that Abnormal's creating that behavioral baseline of your users, but we're also, through a technology that we call vendor base, we're creating a behavioral baseline of the third parties that your users interact with fairly frequently. That allows us to understand if this third party, maybe a vendor of yours, is sending an email at an unusual time of day, or are they using language that's not normal for them,
That's amazing. That right
right?
there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then when we start looking at that third party's behavioral baseline, we can start surfacing abnormal activity there as well, even if it's possibly a lookalike domain or a young sender domain. So let me jump in here again. That last attack that we're looking at, that actually progressed a little bit further before we were able to get the potential customer on the phone. But when I mentioned that it presents the attacker a wealth of understanding, what the attacker was able to find was a message thread between my customer Dave and his partner, where they were discussing the progress of a project, right? We've made it to phase 2. And the real key point to the attacker is, hey, there's some money owed here, $30,000 altogether. But all of this is known good, safe messaging, but it gives that attacker the knowledge he needs to take steps to, you know, make some money. So what did the attackers do? They compromised Dave, but they didn't impersonate Dave. Dave owes money. So what they did was they impersonated Dave's vendor. They went out and registered a new domain, a lookalike domain, adding an extra R to the end of the domain. As humans, we don't usually see the email address. We just see the sender's name, right? We have to go through extra clicks or a mouse over to see the email address. And even if I looked at that email address, would I pick up on that there's an extra R in the name? Likely not, because they're able to use the messages that have already been in flight. So now we have a hijacked message thread because they have access to Dave's mailbox. They can register that domain, and you can see that one of the detections Abnormal saw in this message was a young sender domain, right? We also are looking at the attachments, and nowadays, I'm not saying that malware is never delivered through email, but it is rare. Nowadays, we're not seeing malware land through email. So what's more important about attachment analysis, right? Abnormal is looking at human readable attachments with natural language processing. We want to understand the purpose of the attachment, because it may not be a threat itself, but it has malicious intent. It's not malicious content. And so looking at those attachments helps us to understand the language, the conversation. In this scenario, like I've mentioned before, we're only monitoring the environment because we haven't partnered with the company yet. We're not actively remediating, so we can also see that there's interaction on that message. And that interaction happened to be approving those payments. And in case anybody didn't take the time to look at the email message, the actual attack here is we need to update our banking details.
I love it when you're saying the natural language processing, because like you said, malware, like an executable, an exe being mailed is no longer a threat, right? But it's the human element, the social engineering element that is always the weakest link. And this addresses that. This goes to, like you said, nothing's 100%, but if you can get as close as possible to that wall, then you're going to yeah, I mean, the most expensive firewalls at all are going to be rendered useless by the one determined user to click on something. So if you can eliminate the possibilities of that happening, all the better.
Right. And another thing that's highly valuable in a scenario like this is Abnormal would remediate this message. So now we've blocked that attacker. The chances of any financial loss has been dissolved. But where it's a highly targeted attack and it had a financial component to it, Abnormal is also going to trigger what we call a vendor fraud case. That's going to send notification to your security teams, your messaging teams, whomever you choose, so that you have awareness of this attack. We've protected the user. Here's some links to that malicious content. But why are we notifying you about this? Well, we see armator.com in your environment as a partnered company, possibly a vendor. But we're also seeing a domain that looks like their domain, and it's a young domain. And we're seeing messages being sent from a rare sending location. So now bubbling this up to the IT team, they can make decisions around, do we want to contact our partner and say, hey, we think you may have been compromised. What do you know? What was the information lost? Or in this case, they can now take the time to do a deeper dive. Where did the organizational knowledge come from? Well, it looks like Dave's account has been compromised. So there's a lot of stages to these attacks, as you kind of indicated before. Credentials aren't always lost through an email phish. There are other ways to lose credentials. And so Abnormal sitting in that position of monitoring for malicious emails and remediating, also monitoring that account. Well, outside of those, what if it's a third party that's compromised, right? And now we need to notify you that you've got a vendor that may be compromised. So all of those automated remediations coupled with the notifications to your team really helps you to focus on those higher priorities.
So I like to put myself on a little bit more of a suspicious pedestal when it comes to email. But it's funny, David, because okay, so I 23 years ago in my college dorm room started a fan site for a band, and that site's still going on, and I run it. It's a nice little hobby. Been doing a lot with that band for a while, but I'm not officially affiliated or anything. Last year, I got an email from a company that does like tour equipment, like stages and stuff. I've never heard of this company before, but they reached out to me, and it's like, hey, we've got this invoice for unpaid tour expenses to me, and I'm like, I'm not on the band.com or anything, right? So I'm thinking, okay, this person thinks I'm affiliated with the band. I'm not. Um, but I played along for a little bit, knowing what the heck is this, and they sent me a wire instruction and send it to this and give me bank ACH information. I reached out and called the office. I looked, first of all, not the email, not the phone number of the email. I called their office. Yeah, our accounts got compromised. People, they're a vendor in this example where
Right.
this was a spoof domain, right? It was just slightly, if you look closely, there's a dash. Oh yeah, there is. I ended up talking to them. They acknowledged it. They were working on it or whatever. Secondarily, called the bank of the target, and I said, who's the info on this account? And it's some Miss Susie Q, whatever. Well,
Right.
that account's compromised, by the way, Mr. Bank, because this guy's trying to get me to wire money in there. Why? Probably because they can scoop it out on the other side. I did get an angry call later in the day from said lady to say, you just got my bank account froze. And I resisted the urge to say you're welcome because that was whatever was going in was coming out, no doubt about it. But
Right.
that's something that Abnormal would have detected out of hand as something that, yeah, this is illegitimate, this is a vendor attack, compromise, and go from there. And I would say I'm only patting myself on the back only because I better know better after this many years of being this close to the metal on email. But there's so much to worry about, and we're a high trust society ultimately, right? And you don't want to completely lose that spirit, but at the same time, I think if that almost got me, how about my mom, right? She's not tech savvy, or so many people who aren't. It's just you don't want to expect any level of tech savviness out of a user. They shouldn't have to worry about that at that point.
Well, that's a really key point also is some of our users are in between, tech savvy, not quite. And so they have a heightened awareness. They're seeing messages going, I don't think this is real. And what did they do? They pitch it over to IT or the messaging team. They're like, hey, is this safe to interact with? And that ends up being that now the users are having to make a decision on their own, because sometimes when we report things to IT, they're so busy, they don't get back to us. Or things are queued up for a day or two, right? So that's another automation that Abnormal has in place is we have what we call the AI security mailbox, where when a user's not sure, they can push it over there. And Abnormal takes the approach of if a user's submitting this, maybe we missed something. So now we're going to run a more exhaustive scan on that message, do some additional checks and find out maybe this is malicious. And then using generative AI, we can respond to the user. So we're going to feed the analysis outcome into Gen AI. It writes a more contextual response to the user. Hey, the message is safe. You can engage with it. Now we can allow that business process to move forward. Or that was malicious. Here's some other elements of the message that are malicious that you can look at in the future.
We do email security training internally, and it's one of those things where in IT, so many of us come from help desk, and let me tell you, I don't want to be help desk anymore, right? At most.
Right.
But when I get my coworkers say, "Hey, is this email? What is this?" I love the culture of paranoia. Please be more paranoid. Ask questions. Say, "This looks weird. Is this cool?" Because we're not sending checks out for $1 million because of your paranoia. That is a very good thing. I love that. So the not putting a burden on your users, but having them always with their antenna up also,
Yeah.
you know, is like you said, I'd rather things go a little bit slower for a little bit more extra caution than just it's breakneck speed. It's an email. Chances are it can wait 10 seconds for you to look at it. And then it looks a little weird. Now instead of just wondering, that's somewhere I can send it and then expect the follow up on, yeah, this indeed was, or nope, you're good, and give that extra peace of mind.
Yeah, exactly. I know that
Cool.
we wanted to take some time to pivot over to Rubrik. Just one thing that I wanted to add today really quickly is it's been basically 10 years since Gartner put out a Magic Quadrant for email security. So the last one they released was in 2014. So they just released one at the end of 2024. And for anybody that's unaware of that, that's wondering about email security tools, now we have some guidance from Magic Quadrant. The other reason I'm highlighting is that Abnormal did position the very highest within the quadrant as being visionary and positioned fairly high at the ability to execute on that. So that really speaks to the success of our business, that in the release of kind of a new Magic Quadrant, like the first release in the last 10 years, Abnormal is sitting in such a good position because of our founders' vision and their ability to execute on that vision.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to see, David. And no surprise, in my opinion, no surprise that um, the second fastest growing startup ever. It's just I talk to my teammates. Everybody's got email. It's a problem that absolutely everybody has to deal with, no matter how sophisticated your network security is, et cetera. That is the screen door in your Fort Knox, really is email. And the finer you can make that mesh, the better. So thanks, David. That was great. And hopefully we'll be having a lot more follow-up conversations about it to go deeper even.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks. And now we're joined by Ryan Garrett. Ryan's from Rubrik. We're going to be talking about a different aspect of email protection, but one that's just as important that Rubrik does in diamonds and spades. This is just fantastic. Ryan, good to see you here. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, so I'm on the SaaS data protection team. So I cover our M365, Jira, and Salesforce protection. So this kind of aligns, perfectly with us, the email situation. And it's funny because one of my counterparts who's on this call, he just experienced this, and it was funny listening to David go through all of the different situations. He actually had his brother, who he covers his M365 subscription, received an email on his phone. He clicked on the email, assuming it was a bid. He's a contractor. So he clicks on it to go bid on it. Didn't even enter his credentials. As soon as he clicked the email, it took his token, went through, and they started doing exactly what you guys were talking about. Hey, I have a legit email. I'm going to send it out to other folks, and I'm going to try and bid these jobs or tell them that they need to owe me payment. Like exactly the story that you guys just said. He just experienced that last week. And it's like, oh, it was rough. So yeah, my counterpart and I were kind of brainstorming through like how do we help this not happen in the future? How do we secure that M365 subscription? So
Well,
yeah, that really hit home.
into Rubrik's input on that, I really have appreciated Rubrik's March. And how old is Rubrik now? Would you say it's 8 or 9 years old now?
We just passed our 10-year. We all got sweatshirts of
Okay.
Rubrik's 10-year and back in December.
Mine must have gotten lost in the mail, but I'll hold you to
Yeah.
that later. The thing I've really loved about Rubrik is first and foremost, day one, they were, in my opinion, the best backup and recovery solution on the market. It took this industry that's gone from super legacy to now the new one on the block has kind of gotten a little, lax, I think, and Rubrik just blew the doors off and said it doesn't need to be this way. Came in with a new paradigm. Immutability, I think, is a word because of Rubrik. I mean, really, that's why we know that term. But the really impressive part, and I think Ryan's probably going to go into this a little bit more, is not to wave away like, yeah, backup is something we've solved, even though it kind of is wave away. It's wave away quality. Like, don't worry, it's taken care of. Our 365 tenant is backed up by Rubrik, and every time I go in there, green check marks. How many backup systems have I thought or been working that I've had to manage, and then I go in and say, that thing hasn't been running for 3 months, and I never got an alert? It's just, and it's not a thing with Rubrik. But now what they've done is they've said, great, we've gotten backup solid. And they keep adding, like you said, Salesforce, they keep adding products that they can back up, but they're not resting there. They're not saying, okay, it's protected. It's, okay, we've got the data. We've got a copy of the data. Let's not burden the production systems any more than we have to. We've already pulled that. Now let's see what kind of introspection we can do. Let's see kind of additional indicators of compromise, things like this. I mean, so they keep going forward with the security aspect and proactively so, right? Where it's, yeah, we're here if you need to react. The backstop is absolutely concrete solid, but we're going to try to get on the front foot as well. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, Ryan, but it's something I've really been impressed about the company over its lifetime.
It's funny, Matt, because that's exactly where I start with every conversation is that the goal of Rubrik back in 2019, Microsoft invested financially in Rubrik because they saw a great product on our on-prem protection and said, hey, we want that same thing for M365. So not only financially, but they also invested a ton of engineering hours into us. We designed this product, and the first goal was, hey, how do we guarantee that we have safe data that we can restore from? We want to guarantee that at the end of the day, when a customer goes in and says, hey, my tenant is gone, I can't get any of my emails, they've been deleted. How do we get that data back? And can we guarantee that we have clean and safe data that we can get back for them? We solved that goal years ago. And like you say, now the real focus is how do we help customers recover from a cyber event or even an accidental deletion as fast as possible? So we got clean data. We figured that out. Now what can we do? What additional features can we do based on the data that we're backing up to help you guys get to recovery as fast as possible? And that's kind of what I was going to show today is like, hey, let's talk about how quick and easy it is to add M365 into your Rubrik Security Cloud. It's like, I always tell folks 30-minute meeting one day, 30-minute meeting the next day. We're really taking probably 10 minutes each day.
Yeah,
And then it's set it and forget it.
When I talk to a new customer who's not familiar, I say we're a VAR, and I hate saying it because VAR means a certain thing to a lot of people, and it's usually a big letter R. Oh, you're a reseller. Oh, and I'm like, no, big V, big A, little R. Yeah, we resell by the way of the fact that here's a solution. It happens to come with products sometimes. We don't always sell products. Sometimes it's just services, but the idea is value add. So I've done plenty of Rubrik M365 deals where early on I had my one of my account managers say, well, how much services should we tack on? I go, schedule a 15-minute Zoom and I'll take care of them. Like, what services? It's fantastic.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And that's what I'm gonna show today is literally set it up, 2 30-minute meetings and then let it run. And like you say, a lot of times what I get from my customers, we do a lot of training and help folks get comfortable with the product. But usually after a few weeks, everybody's like, we're good to go. I don't hear from customers for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months down the road. And I'll get an email on doing a webinar or talking to another customer. By the time I can get back to that customer 15, 20, 30 minutes later, they've already sent me an email saying, never mind, I figured it out. I clicked the buttons. It was so simple. I was just off into the races. I have my restore going. We're good to go. Love
I
the
do those
product.
demos. I'll do a demo in our tenant, and I'm on Mac Outlook, which is definitely, no offense to stepchildren or redheaded people, but it is the redheaded stepchild of the M365 client experience. And when I do a demo restore, it's like, first of all, every time I try to open up the index and browse, it's faster every time. I don't know if Rubrik obviously continually improves their restorability because it used to take 30 seconds, oh no, and now it takes like 4 to bring up my index when I haven't brought it up in weeks. and then to restore them, I'm like, oh, yep, there's the folder. Up, yep, there's the item, and it's back. I mean, you're talking seconds. It's impressive.
Yeah, cool. I'm not going to bore everybody with slides, but I'm just going to dive right into the demo. I'll show you guys the interface, and we can kind of talk through a lot of this stuff. And then Matt, as you have questions, just throw them out there as we're walking through this. And
Yeah.
then if anybody on the call has questions, put it in the Q&A, and Matt will either call it out live or I'll run through and answer all the questions kind of
And
towards the end too.
thanks, Ryan. I did want to highlight, in addition to that this is all cloud-based. This does not require anything on-premise for Rubrik, correct? You need to be a Rubrik customer or anything not necessarily, right? To leverage
Correct.
this.
So you do need to be a Rubrik customer.
I'm
You
sorry,
need
you
to
don't
either
already have to have an on-prem
buy.
footprint.
Correct. Yeah. So we have a lot of customers that they have an on-prem footprint with another legacy product, and they say, hey, we don't want to step into that. We don't want to expand that. So a lot of times what they'll do is say, hey, we want to head in the direction of Rubrik, but we've already invested in on-prem. So a lot of times what they'll do is they'll step in with M365 and say, we're not protecting it today. Let's protect it with Rubrik. You get a Rubrik Security Cloud instance, which is the interface I just logged into, and then from there you can take that back up M365. And it's literally as easy as add workload when you guys are ready to add additional workloads. So yeah, very simple. Cool. So I'm gonna switch over to kind of the global dashboard, and I'll kind of land here first. But the way we break this up is this is Rubrik Security Cloud. It is a single interface. We call it the single pane of glass. So whether you're protecting on-prem cloud workloads, like think of AWS or Azure workloads, if you're doing M365, Salesforce, if you're doing your NCD, your NAS workloads and file unstructured stuff, everything is brought into one interface. And the goal there is ultimately to make it simple for you guys to recover. Hey, I don't have to go into this other product over here and figure out how it was backed up or recovered. I don't have to log into this other product and deal with that other product and how it recovers. It's like, let's simplify everything and make it just easy as possible. And let's try to make it as uniform as possible. Whether I'm restoring this resource or that resource, it's pretty much the same. And then, like Matt talked about, Rubrik is going the extra mile. And what I always kind of explain, and this is kind of like the secret sauce of Rubrik, what Rubrik is doing is when we back up your guys' data, we're using Azure Kubernetes service on the M365 side to do indexing and metadata. And what that means to Rubrik, it may mean something different to everybody else, but what it means to Rubrik, indexing means like I'm taking a file and I'm looking at it from the outside, and I'm file name, the size, who created it, information like that. Not really anything about the inside of the file. That's indexing. That gives you the search capability, the ability to like, hey, I'm looking for an email or a SharePoint site or whatever. The next piece that Rubrik does, and then we started doing this probably 6 or 7 years ago. We started doing metadata. Metadata is I'm going to actually crack open the file. So this is for M365. It's for your SharePoint and OneDrive. So think of your file data. But I crack the data actually open, read the contents of the file, and then I write a summary of what I found inside the file into the metadata. And I send this index and metadata up to Rubrik Security Cloud, and then I run analytics against it to provide additional value back to you. So an example of that would be sensitive data discovery. So, hey, this is the most popular thing this time of year. Hey, Ryan Garrett filled out his tax return. He saved it to his desktop, which was then synced into OneDrive. Well, your social security number is in the corner of every page of your tax return. So what'll happen is Rubrik will pick that up and say, hey, I see within Ryan Garrett's OneDrive, there's 2024 tax return. It has eight social security numbers. So being able to identify like where that sensitive data is, super critical. Kind of three aspects nowadays. In times of peace, hey, should that data live there? Can I go tell Ryan to remove it? In times of war, hey, I've been attacked. What data was potentially exposed? And then one of the big new things that we're seeing out there is, hey, Copilot's able to discover this sensitive data. Do we really want Copilot coming back and telling us, hey, I see all of this sensitive data from HR because it's not secure? So now take that information, go secure it before Copilot gives you an output of all of that sensitive data that's in your environment.
Well, to that point, Ryan, that's a good point. And I know the answer to this, but I'm going to play devil's advocate and say, isn't my email protected? I'm on Microsoft 365. Isn't the email already backed up by way of being on 365?
It's a great question. So Microsoft technically doesn't back it up. It's a shared responsibility model. The easiest way to explain this is if you guys were to rent an apartment in a large apartment building, Microsoft will provide the water, the power, the sewer. They'll provide the outside of the building, the windows, things like that. But technically, you're responsible for all of the belongings inside of that apartment. So if someone breaks down your door, gets into your environment, steals all of your stuff, you're technically responsible in their EULA. And so that's why it's really, really important. Microsoft will actually back a third-party backup product and say, hey, you guys need to back this up because at the end of the day, you guys are responsible for that data.
Thanks, Ryan. I just shared a link to that shared responsibility model. Admittedly, I appreciate Microsoft's transparency on this, right? In that they're out there saying, no, 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 that's not us, and you should know that it's not us in that case. So it's got a good chart on there too, if anybody wants to click that errata.
Yeah, and real quick, I'm just going to jump into threat analytics real quick. So, brand new feature just came out. I think it was 2 weeks ago. So we're doing anomaly detection, something we've been doing on-prem for a long time, but we're doing anomaly detection for OneDrive and SharePoint. So what this will allow you guys to do is see, hey, if someone's, let's say OneDrive gets encrypted locally and those files get synced up to OneDrive, we will alert you, hey, we see anomalous behavior. So, there's something wrong going on here. Go take a look. The real critical ability on that is, hey, understanding when an event actually occurred and knowing when the clean snapshot was right before it. So, hey, something happened yesterday to Ryan Garrett's OneDrive. We want to revert that back to just the day before. And right now, this is available for OneDrive and SharePoint. But yeah, having that ability, but also mass deletion. Hey, Ryan Garrett left the organization and he didn't know, but he was deleting a bunch of stuff on his desktop, trying to clean up before he left, and all of that data was then deleted in OneDrive. Do we need any of that data? We're going to get alerted for that and we can make that decision. And we have threat hunting and threat monitoring, which is the ability to identify indicators of compromise. So, hey, bad actor gets in, drops a payload in OneDrive or in SharePoint. That's coming kind of later this year, summertime, but we'll have that feature as well. And that's kind of an addition to that anomaly detection feature.
And that's awesome. I mean, between the two, you've got mail flow and account behavior from an abnormal standpoint, and then Rubrik not only protecting. Again, you need a solid backup, and I'm happy to share your point of view. I mean, it's just taken care of, yes, but if you can be more proactive with that data and not just be this passive entity that's reacting and restoring all of the time, you can prevent that, all the better. Yeah, I love that, and I think the shared responsibility model is something that is good to lean into and make sure everybody's aware of that. Trying to think from a Rubrik Security Cloud standpoint, I think it's a good model for Rubrik to demonstrate what they can do for data protection and introspection on a relatively low, like you said, it takes 15 minutes to set up. I've also we're not here to talk price, but I've also found it's incredibly modestly priced in terms of what you're getting. It's just to me it lives in no-brainer territory. And I just have loved to see the fact that they continue to add features, right? I mean, and it's a single pane of glass when it comes to, oh, you've got Azure VM workloads. Yeah, Rubrik Security Cloud does that too, and that's a little bit out of topic here, but yeah, I mean, all greens is what I've only ever seen in here. I never see failures.
Yeah, that's one of the best things I love. It's like, even if you do see some failures, they're usually cleared up. We do retries, so it'll usually clear itself up right away. So yeah,
And
it's
Ryan,
really nice.
I'm still, when it comes to protecting this, I still control the private key for the data itself. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. So yeah, let me walk through like add subscription. So let's pretend it's day one. You guys have bought Rubrik. When you guys sign into Rubrik, you're gonna literally walk in here to inventory. You're gonna hit add workload. I already have M365 in here, so I'm just gonna do it a slightly different way. But when I hit add subscription, we have a couple options here. You guys can do multi-geo. So if you have preferred data location, you guys have users spread all over the globe. We can key off those preferred data locations. We will spin up resources on the Rubrik side to back up their data locally. And then if you guys say, hey, you know what, I'm just based here in the Northwest, or I'm mostly based in the US, you can specify which data center you want to put it in. Keep in mind, this data center is owned, managed, paid for by Rubrik. You guys don't have any additional cost. The licensing is all based on the number of active users you guys are protecting and the amount of front-end terabytes that we're protecting. So it's just a storage and a user, a license model. So you don't have to worry about any of the costs of the compute, the Azure Kubernetes, the Azure Blob storage, any of that stuff. That's all taken care of by Rubrik. But you get to specify which data center you want it in. So you could do like West US2, probably for most of our customers. And then for Azure Key Vault, because we're doing disk encryption, so we do AES 256 disk encryption for encryption at rest. And then we also have encryption in flight, which is TLS 1.3. So encryption everywhere, protecting your data. But you can, for encryption at rest, you can use your own Azure Key Vault. So you can either let Rubrik manage it, will automatically rotate your keys every 30 days for you. Or if you say, hey, I'm security conscious, I want to manage my own keys, you guys can manage your own keys and rotate them at whatever cadence you want as well. Once you get through here, though, you hit add subscription. Takes about 2 minutes for Rubrik to go start spinning up those resources on the Rubrik side. Then you get a screen that looks like this, and it just asks you to log in to authenticate with your workloads. What Rubrik is going to do is peer into your guys' Intra ID, and you're going to sign in with a global admin. It's a temporary global admin. All it's doing is allowing us to go in and create an enterprise app on your side. Once we create an enterprise app for Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, and then we have a management app so we can communicate with Intra. Once we do that, we use the API tokens associated with each of those enterprise apps. So no long-standing global admin permissions needed. It'll just be the permissions that are associated on those enterprise apps. And I always tell folks, it's just backup operator.
They're
We
the
need
data
the,
movers, right?
yeah, it's a
Yep.
backup operator permission. Yep. Once you're done with that, literally we wait till the next day, let Rubrik peer into your M365 to inventory everything. We come in the next day, we say, hey, we want to assign an SLA domain. I'll just briefly go through this, but an SLA domain for M365, I'm really going to ask you just two basic questions. We can turn on retention lock. Retention lock is just, hey, if anybody makes a change to this, we're going to have two other people approve it. So this helps from a bad actor getting in and trying to change your retention to 1 day, or an accidental change from an admin. But then beyond that, we just ask two questions. How often you want to take a snapshot? How long do you want to retain them for? Very, very simple. Once we create this SLA, then we can come back over to M365 and we say, hey, we want to assign this. I'll say probably 95% of our customers assign it at the workload level. So you can say, hey, I want to protect all my Exchange users, all my OneDrive, all my SharePoint, all my Teams. Assign that SLA. And let's say you did daily, keep for 30 days. Rubrik will just go out and start taking backups of all of your users, all, OneDrive, SharePoint, Exchange, Teams, and take backups daily, keep that for 30 days. So very automated, not a lot of thought process from the actual admin managing this. They just set up the SLA, point it to the workloads they want to protect, and then it just goes and does it. Like you
And I
say,
mean,
the
it
green
depends on the size
checkbox.
of the environment, but I mean, it's not hyperbolic to say you're completely protected within 2 hours to bat your entire environment backed up, depending on the size, of course.
Yeah, that's a good call out. So when we talk about how long it takes, so Rubrik is going to take a first full, and then we're going to take incrementals forever forward. That first full can take a long time.
Mhm.
For example, I had a customer, a large healthcare customer, had 17,000 users. On
Oh.
average, each user was about 5 gigs. It took us 3 days to get
Mhm.
through all four of the workloads to
And
get
the
those
nice thing
first
is nobody
fulls.
felt it, right? Nobody felt it in a day to day, which is not all that typical with a traditional backup system either.
Yeah, we do all of our POCs for the most part. Most of our POCs are done in prod because no one notices. There's no impact to prod. We create some test users. We restore prod user data into test user data. It's very simple.
Yeah, we had a fire drill where we had to get spun up on Rubrik M365. Rubrik was great as our partner, saying, "Here you go, you're entitled Ivoxy," and we were up and running. And the setup was like you saw, 5 minutes, and then we're not 17,000 mailboxes, thank goodness. But it was way fast in 3 days. And I think for our experience, I saw the completed within an hour or two for our entire environment.
Yeah, and I will say, the engineering team on the Rubrik side, we meet with Microsoft engineers on a weekly basis. And back in November, there were some major improvements into working with Microsoft and understanding the least number of API calls that we can make to take a backup and to kick off a restore. And that made a huge impact. Like we saw customers that I was saying, hey, this is going to take 31 days, is now taking 6 or 7 days to back up their entire subscription. So major improvements.
You mentioned users and capacity. Is that a scientific method, or is there an easy way for me to collect what my footprint's going to be or my license needs are going to be?
Yeah, great call out. So Rubrik actually has this. It's public facing. It's funny because I've heard our competitors actually use this sizing script sometimes because it's so good. It's kind of funny, but yeah,
Well,
out on GitHub.
competitors.
Yeah, out on GitHub, there's actually a script. So if you just search for Rubrik M365 sizing script, you can go out here and just run this sizing script. It's a PowerShell script. It collects data from your M365 usage console. It collects some data from your Exchange, so you can get like in-place archive size and things like that. But when it's all said and done, you run the script. It'll give you some CSVs, but it'll give you an HTML summary file. This file has no sensitive data. It's literally just a summary of your environment, but it'll tell you how many users you have, total size for each workload. It'll tell you how many millions of objects you have, and it'll give you all of this data. And then from a Rubrik perspective, what we do is we run it through a calculator, and it'll tell us, hey, this is how many licenses at whatever tier. We technically sell a 5 gig, a 20 gig, a 50 gig, and an unlimited tier. And what we try to do is fit those the best financial way for you guys. So I don't want to sell you a bunch of 50s if you just need fives. So we try to sell you the right combination of licenses to make sure that you guys have enough pooled storage to protect the amount of storage that you guys want to have as well as users. But we take all this data, kind of punch it in there. And then one of the nice things is the new sizing script will also give us the item counts, which will allow me to tell you, hey, roughly this is how many days it's going to take to onboard.
That's outstanding. Yeah, it's something that, like I said, I knew the answer to that, Ryan. Thank you for explaining it, but it's one of those. I never want to come off as flippant with the gravity or the seriousness or how technically impressive things are, but it really makes me happy to have customers, and I have customers that are, I can't say I've got a single unhappy experience, right? And Rubrik's one of those rare vendors where I can say, and I don't have a customer saying, yeah, 365, we tried it for a year, we didn't really love it. I've never had a takeout or a customer stop renewing M365 protection. It's just been that good. So thanks for helping us illustrate that.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Matt.
Well, thank you guys. Yeah, we got 5 minutes. You guys stuck the landing really well. Yeah, I just lean into the fact that if I've got my allowance and mom and dad have given me $1 to spend on anything security related, I'm sending it towards the email arena. It's just it's such a screen door. In fact, that it's got such a large surface area. Everybody uses it. It's absolutely business mission critical to everything everybody does. So, and then you've got the social engineering aspect of it, right? You've got humans in there, even not maliciously, but ignorantly clicking and doing whatever. And the best way to ensure the integrity is to make sure that the technology is as transparent as possible, but as effective as possible too. And between Abnormal and Rubrik, very exciting times to say you don't have to worry about your email, really. I mean, it might hit the fan, but you're well protected if in that 1%. One other question I had, Ryan, not Ryan, but David actually. There is a email penetration test, I think is what Abnormal calls it. Is that right?
So that would go back to what I mentioned earlier, proof of value. What we do is we'll integrate with your tenant and we land with pre-trained models. We have a suite of models. It's not just one monolithic model, and we align those models based on the vertical you work in and how we see your users using their email. So we'll land with those models. Now we need to refine those models to your environment. That's going to allow us to more accurately detect attacks in your environment. And the way that we do that is with a 45 to 90 day historical look back. We use that historical data set to refine those models. And we can do that within about 7 to 10 days. So we integrate, kind of wait for 7 to 10 days, and then we come back and show you what we call a care report, highlighting those attacks that you said were most concerning to you or that you've struggled to get control over. And then we'll give you about 30 days within the portal to see your own environment data flowing through that for about 30 days. And we call it a proof of value because we're really just trying to show you the value that we can create through properly identifying attacks and then automating that workflow.
So anybody who has been attending, for being so attentive and attending the webinar, reach out to your account manager or me, anybody, if you want to see what that looks like. Like David, it's non-obtrusive. It's similar to, I'm sure it's similar in setup to Rubrik's POC, where it's a read-only operation. It's temporary authentication and all that. It's
right.
Super cool. Yeah. The lack of friction in onboarding is definitely a virtue, and I'm happy to see both the sides of things, handling it that way. Well, if anybody doesn't have any more questions here, we're right on time. So I want to thank everybody for attending. I know we're all zoomed to death, increasingly so, but seems to be the way forward and the way to be as least impactful on everybody's day. At the same time, on a Thursday, an hour out of the middle of the day, very valuable. So I really appreciate everybody's time and willingness. If you've got questions, you have my contact information. You'll be getting emails following up with us. Please feel free to reach out. Happy to do deeper dive follow-ups in any direction you want to go, or just shoot the breeze and talk shop too. So thanks again for attending, everyone. Have a great rest of your Thursday. David and Ryan, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.